The life of Saint Carlo Acutis, the first millennial saint. Today we celebrate the extraordinary life of Saint Carlo Acutis, the ultimate modern role model. He wasn't a figure from the distant past, he was a teenager, a computer programmer, a gamer, and the first millennial saint, a resounding proof that holiness is not reserved for the few, but is a possibility for every single person, right here and now, in the middle of our digital world. Carlo was born in London on November 3, 1991, to Italian parents, Andrea Acutis and Antonia Salzano, but the family soon relocated to Milan, the bustling heart of northern Italy. Though the family was financially comfortable, they were spiritually lacking. His parents were culturally Catholic but non-practicing. Yet, from a very early age, Carlo displayed an astonishing, deep, and utterly unprompted love for God. His desire for the divine was a blazing anomaly. His mother, Antonia, has often recounted the profound, humbling experience of her son's innate faith. He simply couldn't pass a church without asking to stop in, pull her inside, and say hello to Jesus in the tabernacle. This simple, insistent devotion was so utterly pure and compelling that it led directly to the profound religious conversion of his own mother. It was the young boy who became the chief evangelist of his own home. For Carlo, the absolute center of his existence, the very foundation of his entire life plan, was Jesus and the Eucharist. He would declare, with the unwavering conviction of a prophet, "The Eucharist is my highway to heaven." He yearned for that encounter with Christ so deeply that he received his first Holy Communion early, at the age of 7. From that defining day forward, he made it a non-negotiable habit to attend daily Mass and frequently spend time in quiet adoration before the Blessed Sacrament. Carlo understood, with a wisdom far beyond his years, that this daily communion with Christ was the secret to living an extraordinary life, even while maintaining an ordinary routine. And in many ways, Carlo was ordinary. He loved playing soccer in the park, he was a loyal and great friend, he went to school, and he wore the simple black jeans and Nike sneakers of his generation. But he lived his life with radical discipline and an extraordinary sense of purpose. He consciously limited his video game time, understanding that if he didn't master technology, technology would master him. He was a tireless defender of the weak. Carlo was known for his remarkable kindness, his fierce defense of the bullied at school, especially children with disabilities who others overlooked, and his boundless generosity to the poor and homeless he met on the streets of Milan. He didn't just feel sorry for them, he used his own allowance and first savings to buy sleeping bags and food. He was famous for his piercing quote, "All people are born as originals, but many die as photocopies," using it as a profound challenge to everyone around him, especially his peers, to seek out the unique, unrepeatable purpose God had for them and avoid the soul-numbing trap of conformity and mediocrity. Crucially, Carlo was a genius with technology. He was a gifted self-taught computer programmer and web designer, skills that went far beyond basic proficiency. He was determined to use this knowledge, the very language of his generation, not as a frivolous pastime, but as a powerful, modern tool for evangelization. When he was just 11 years old, he began his definitive spiritual masterpiece, an immense, 2.5-year project that consumed his family's vacations and his own passion. He used his coding skills to create a massive, detailed traveling exhibition and a comprehensive website to catalog every known Eucharistic miracle and Marian apparition from around the world. He painstakingly researched, photographed, and organized 187 miracles. He wanted to use the logic and accessibility of the internet to draw people back to the profound, tangible truth of Christ's real presence in the Massachusetts. His simple goal was to make Christ present in the world's fastest-growing medium. Then, in October of 2006, at the shockingly young age of 15, Carlo was suddenly struck down with a devastating and aggressive form of acute leukemia. The illness was swift, moving from flu-like symptoms to a terminal diagnosis in mere days, but his faith was utterly unbreakable. He faced his final days with immense courage, serenity, and grace, offering all his intense suffering for the Lord, for the Pope, and the entire Church, and for his readiness to go to heaven. He told his mother that he could die happy because he had not wasted a single minute of his short life doing things that wouldn't have pleased God. He passed away on October 12, 2006, and was buried in Assisi, the city of St. Francis, which he dearly loved, forever linking his simple, evangelical life with the great saint of humility. Today, the Church recognizes his life as a model of heroic virtue, having declared him Saint Carlo Acutis. This teenager, who used a laptop and made the Eucharist his primary love, stands as a powerful, contemporary witness that sanctity is attainable for all, the patron saint of the Internet and a guiding light for youth across the entire globe. The life of Saint Callistus I, the Pope of Radical Mercy. To understand the story of Saint Callistus I, the 16th successor of Saint Peter, is to witness one of the most remarkable transformations in the early Church. His life is an astonishing journey from a Roman slave and convicted criminal to the Bishop of Rome and a great martyr. He was the Pope who radically redefined the scope of God's mercy. The story of Callistus, whose early life we know primarily through the writings of his bitter opponent, Hippolytus, begins in the harsh reality of late 2nd century Rome. He was born a slave in a Christian household. His master, Carpophorus, entrusted the young Callistus with money collected from the Christian community, funds meant to care for widows and orphans. Tragically, Callistus lost these funds, possibly through a dishonest investment or careless stewardship. He fled, was recaptured, and sentenced to a grueling period of forced labor in a grain mill. Later, after a tumultuous dispute, he was condemned and sent to the mines of Sardinia, a notorious, brutal death sentence for Roman prisoners, especially Christians. Yet, this dark period of suffering became his crucible. Through the intervention of Pope Victor I and the Emperor's mistress, Callistus was eventually released. His body was broken by the mines, but his spirit, forged in suffering, was ready for service. After his release, Callistus's life took a stunning turn. Pope Zephyrinus recognized his talents and potential, despite his past, and brought him into the service of the Church, ordaining him a deacon. His first major assignment showcased his remarkable administrative skill. He was put in charge of the Church's first publicly owned piece of property, a Christian burial ground on the Appian Way. Callistus meticulously organized and expanded this network of tunnels, which soon became the resting place of 9 future popes. To this day, it is known as the Catacombs of St. Callistus, a monument to the former slave's excellent stewardship. Because of this success and his close relationship with the aging Pope Zephyrinus, Callistus was a natural candidate to succeed him. In 217 AD, the Christian community in Rome elected Callistus as pope. His brief papacy, lasting about 5 years, was defined by an act of unprecedented, radical mercy that caused a massive controversy and a schism. Prior to Callistus, the Church largely maintained a severe discipline. Christians who committed the gravest sins, specifically murder, adultery, or apostasy, were often excommunicated for life. Callistus, remembering his own past and relying on the gospel authority given to Peter, issued a groundbreaking declaration. He asserted the Church's power to absolve all sins, no matter how serious, after sincere repentance and penance. This policy was denounced as shockingly lax by many conservative voices, most notably the theologian Tertullian and the priest Hippolytus of Rome. Hippolytus was so outraged that he set himself up as a rival bishop, becoming the first antipope in church history. He accused Callistus of undermining the integrity of the Church by letting sinners back in too easily. Callistus also extended his mercy in practical, social ways. He officially recognized the marriages of free women to slaves, a union forbidden and unrecognized by strict Roman civil law, affirming the equality and dignity of Christians regardless of their social status. Saint Callistus stood firm. His life itself was a testament to the power of God's forgiveness, and he insisted that the Church must always be a harbor for the repentant sinner, not just a club for the perfect. He bravely established a principle that the Church has championed ever since. Saint Callistus I died a martyr around 222 or 223 AD. It is believed his death came not from a systematic imperial persecution, but from a violent popular anti-Christian uprising in Rome. Tradition holds that he was seized, tormented, and finally thrown into a well. His legacy is immense. He was the former slave and convict who demonstrated the full, restorative power of the gospel. He took the foundational truth of Peter's authority and used it to officially mandate mercy as the defining characteristic of the Church, creating a sanctuary for everyone who had fallen. His feast day is celebrated every year on October 14th. The Life of Pope St. John XXIII, a continuous narrative. The saint we celebrate today, Pope St. John XXIII, is one of the most beloved figures in modern history, a man who, in a mere 5 years, dramatically changed the course of a 2,000-year-old church. His life began with profound simplicity. He was born Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli on November 25, 1881, in the small Italian village of Sotto il Monte. His family were poor sharecroppers, tenant farmers, and Angelo was one of 13 children. The home was materially poor, but incredibly rich in faith, and the values he learned in those simple fields, humility, hard work, and deep devotion, remained with him for life. Despite their struggle, his parents recognized his intellectual promise, and young Angelo was able to pursue an education that led him to the priesthood, where he was ordained in 1904. He quickly adopted his lifelong spiritual compass, the motto, Obedientia et Pax, obedience and peace. For the next 5 decades, Father Roncalli's life was anything but provincial. He became a Vatican diplomat, traveling the globe and gaining an extraordinary, open-minded perspective on the world. He served in the challenging post of apostolic delegate in Bulgaria for a decade, and later in Turkey and Greece, a vantage point that allowed him to see the Church not just as a Western institution, but as a global family that needed to dialogue with Orthodox, Jewish, and Muslim communities. It was during the terror of World War II, while stationed in Turkey, that his simple goodness met history. Risking his own life, he courageously used his diplomatic connections to help save thousands of Jewish refugees from the Nazi persecution, forging visas and orchestrating escapes. His humanity transcended politics and religion. He would later serve in France, helping that nation's church heal and rebuild after years of occupation. In 1953, the diplomatic mission concluded when he was created a cardinal and sent to be the Patriarch of Venice, where he thought he would happily retire into the life of a simple, local bishop. But the world had other plans for the man who was nearly 77 years old. In 1958, following the death of Pope Pius XII, Cardinal Roncalli was elected pope. He was a compromise candidate, chosen for his advanced age. Everyone expected him to be a quiet, caretaker pope, a transitional figure who would keep the seat warm. Instead, the world met Pope John XXIII, the good pope. He immediately shattered the walls of the Vatican. He was a pope of gestures, visiting the sick in hospitals, having dinner with prisoners, and speaking to the world with a disarming warmth and simplicity. He instantly became the grandfather of the world, a reflection of God's unconditional love. And then, just 3 months into his reign, he stunned the entire world. He announced his intention to call an ecumenical council, a gathering of all the world's bishops, to confront the challenges of the modern era. His purpose was to bring the Church into the present, and aggiornamento, a radical renewal. The Great Council, Vatican II, was solemnly opened on October 11, 1962, the very day we celebrate his feast today. On that night, Pope John delivered one of his most famous, unscripted speeches, saying he wanted to throw open the windows of the Church so that the world could see in and the Church could see out. Though his illness prevented him from seeing the council to its conclusion, his spirit of hope, dialogue, and profound faith guided every document and every discussion. His final gift to humanity was his last great encyclical, Pacem in Terris, Peace on Earth, released just 2 months before his death in 1963. It was an urgent plea for human dignity, justice, and disarmament, addressed not just to Catholics, but to all men and women of goodwill. Pope St. John XXIII proved that a simple, obedient heart, guided by a boundless love for humanity, can create a legacy more enduring than any earthly kingdom. He died in 1963, having opened the windows of the Church to let in a fresh, new breeze that continues to move us today. Saint Teresa of Calcutta, a life defined by service, suffering, and scrutiny. Mother Teresa, born Ange's Gongsa Bojaxiu, remains one of the most recognizable and transformative figures of the 20th century. Her small stature, wrinkled face, and simple blue and white sari became globally synonymous with selfless devotion to the poorest and most abandoned people on earth. Yet, the story of the woman who would become a Catholic saint is far more complex than the icon, marked by a hidden spiritual desolation and significant, enduring controversy. Part 1, The Making of a Missionary, 1910 to 1946. Childhood and Early Vocation. Ange's Gongsa Bojaxiu was born on August 26, 1910, in Skopje, then part of the Ottoman Empire, now the capital of North Macedonia. Her family was of Albanian descent, and her father, a successful merchant involved in local politics, died when she was just 8. Her mother, Drain, a devout and compassionate woman, raised Ange's and her 2 siblings, instilling in her a deep sense of faith and charity. By the age of 12, Ange's felt a strong calling to religious life, specifically to work as a missionary. At 18, she left home, never to see her mother or sister again, to join the Sisters of Loreto in Ireland. It was here she received the name Sister Mary Teresa, after Saint Therese of Lisieux, the patron saint of missionaries. After a brief novitiate, she departed for India, arriving in Calcutta in 1929. A life behind convent walls. From 1931 to 1948, Sister Teresa taught history and geography at St. Mary's High School for Bengali girls in the comfortable Loreto Convent in Antoli, eastern Calcutta. She took her final vows in 1937, adopting the title Mother Teresa as was the custom for nuns who had made their final profession. She learned to speak both Bengali and Hindi and eventually became the school's principal in 1944. Though she enjoyed teaching, she became increasingly disturbed by the agonizing poverty she witnessed just outside the convent's walls. The devastating Bengal famine of 1943 and the violence of the 1946 Direct Action Day riots plunged the city into crisis, deepening her internal conflict between her comfortable life and the suffering around her. The call within a call. The moment that irrevocably changed her life occurred on September 10, 1946, while traveling by train from Calcutta to Darjeeling for her annual retreat. She later described this as a call within a call, a profound, mystical experience where she felt the voice of Jesus, abandoned and in pain on the cross, asking her to serve the poorest of the poor by living among them. The vision was clear. He asked her to start a new religious community dedicated to serving him in the unwanted, the unloved, the uncared for. This was a command to leave the relative security of the convent and embrace the radical poverty of the slum dwellers. Part 2. The Birth of the Mission, 1948-1970s. The Blue-Bordered Sari. After nearly 2 years of seeking permission, Mother Teresa received authorization from the Holy See in 1948 to leave the cloistered order. She shed her traditional Loreto habit for a simple, rough white cotton sari with a blue border, the uniform she chose to signify her new life of poverty and to identify with the women of India. She took Indian citizenship, received brief medical training, and ventured into the Calcutta slums with nothing but 5 rupees, a rosary, and an extraordinary conviction. The Missionaries of Charity. Joined by a few of her former students, Mother Teresa founded the Missionaries of Charity in 1950. The order's fourth vow, in addition to the traditional poverty, chastity, and obedience, is to give wholehearted free service to the poorest of the poor. The early days were marked by immense struggle, but the sisters began to establish services that addressed the most acute human suffering. Near Malhriday, established in 1952, this was the famous home for the dying destitutes, where people, often found on the streets, could die with dignity and attention. Shirshu Bhavan, a home for orphaned, abandoned, and disabled children. Shandinagar, a leprosy colony that provided medical care and community for those suffering from the disease. International expansion. From the 1960s onward, the Missionaries of Charity expanded rapidly beyond India, with centers opening across the world. The order's work was featured in the 1969 film documentary Something Beautiful for God and the subsequent book by British journalist Malcolm Muggeridge, launching Mother Teresa onto the world stage as a living saint. Part 3. Spiritual Darkness and Global Recognition. The Nobel Peace Prize and Global Platform. Mother Teresa's fame peaked in 1979 when she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Characteristically, she refused the traditional celebratory banquet, asking that the money be donated to the poor, stating, "I believe the greatest destroyer of peace today is abortion, because it is a direct war, a direct killing, a direct murder by the mother herself." Her unyielding conservatism on matters of sexual ethics and abortion became an integral part of her public persona and a central point of future criticism. She used her global platform to travel tirelessly, opening hospices, children's homes, and centers for AIDS patients across nearly every continent, often in the world's most impoverished and war-torn areas. The Hidden Agony, a Dark Night of the Soul. The most stunning revelation about Mother Teresa's life came a decade after her death with the publication of her private letters in the book Come Be My Light, 2007. These letters revealed that, for nearly 50 years, from just after she began her mission until her death, she suffered from a profound and agonizing spiritual crisis. Following her initial mystical call, she experienced what Catholic theologians call a dark night of the soul. In her private writings to confessors, she described an intense sense of separation from God, of an internal void, writing, "The place of God in my soul is blank. There is no God in me. When the pain of longing is so great, I just long and long for God, and then comes the terrible feeling of being unwanted by God." She felt a profound loneliness and even considered herself a hypocrite for preaching a God whose tangible presence she could not feel. The fact that she continued her grueling, joyful work for the poor for 5 decades while enduring this inner turmoil became, for many, the ultimate proof of her heroic faith and sanctity. Mother Teresa's life was a testament to a faith that moved mountains, fueled by a relentless desire to embody Christian compassion. Her legacy is one of the 20th century's greatest dichotomies, a public image of unwavering, joyful faith juxtaposed with decades of private spiritual torment, and a global movement of charity overshadowed by questions of medical efficacy and theological priorities. She was, and remains, a global figure whose immense impact compels the world to look beyond the myth and confront the harsh realities of service, sacrifice, and the search for God in the deepest darkness.